Hello, you. Old school fans of mine, in fact, those who go back to watching me when I was on TV, may remember my old partner Wes, who helped make a lot of the early videos on this channel, like the Retro Corners and Wes and Larry's Top 10s, obviously. In fact, the most popular video on my channel, 7 Sins, was entirely Wes's creation. Anyhow, Wes is going to help me out for a bit, and I thought you might like to see one of his videos. He has a different sense of humour to me, such as intentionally getting a few things wrong for the sake of comedy, so keep an eye out for that. But I thought you'd like to see some new content in the style of videos we first put out online. Enjoy!
This is the Xbox. Later it was called the Xbox One, before the Xbox One was called the Xbox One. So now we don't refer to it as the Xbox One anymore, we just call it the original Xbox, or the Xbox. This video is all about the making of the original Xbox, not physically like in unethical overcrowded child labour factories, because that would bring down the mood. Instead, this video will focus from inception to conception, perception, reception and beyond, the history of the original Xbox One, the Xbox, which is also the title of the video. It was the late 90s and people were watching films like The Matrix, being forced to listen to the Spice Girls. Phil Harrison had hair. People were panicking they'd get sick from this thing called the Millennium Bug. In the world of video games, thanks to the PlayStation, Sony was on top, whilst Nintendo and Sega were taking a right pounding. So when Sony announced the successor to the PlayStation, with the PlayStation 2, a sort of sequel to the original but more expensive, Nintendo and Sega were worried. And so was Microsoft. Consoles were becoming much more powerful and they felt that PS2 was a threat to PCs. Not physically, but that it might affect sales. And Microsoft were such big fans of money, they had a lot of it, and they didn't want to lose out on any more. Sega was too busy failing with the Dreamcast and Nintendo were working on a Dolphin. So it took Microsoft employee Seamus Buckley to do something about it, by coming up with the idea for Microsoft to lose money in other ways.
So, one night, for whatever reason, I was sitting on an airplane and I got hit by cosmic radiation.
Seamus claimed the cosmic radiation gave him superpowers, but not good superpowers like the ability to fly or X-ray vision where you could see through people's clothes, but a crap one, which just made him come up with a games console. A Microsoft games console. Keen to develop a games console for developers, by developers, for developers, Seamus wanted to make a games console with PC parts that could play games, like a PC, except smaller, like a games console. Now Microsoft wasn't complete strangers to the game industry. They had helped Sega by installing Windows on the Dreamcast. But what exactly does a games console need Windows for? There's no one looking in or out of it. It didn't make any sense. Many believed was a large factor in the fall of Sega. Seamus and his mate Kevin met with games developers to present their idea. Developers were extremely receptive, berating and laughing at them. One large Japanese developer could see the potential of the Xbox, as he proclaimed that no Microsoft console, and especially no American console, could succeed. You see, many had believed that lessons from Atari had not been learned. A Microsoft console would be the first American console since the Atari Jaguar, which flopped after Atari realised that Jaguars are too dangerous to have as a games console, leading to multiple children dead. Still, Seamus was adamant to make a games console and enlisted the support of others, including Ed Fries and Jay Mallard, the first ever duck to be employed at Microsoft. The group were eventually given the green light, but were not sure what to do with the green light, so went about making a games console instead. It wasn't too long before Bill Gates got excited and announced Microsoft as officially entering the console race, despite the fact that consoles don't do very well in a race. Many questioned how a company as uncool as Microsoft could make it in the gaming industry. Microsoft wasn't cool, they were all computers and nerdy. But Sony was cool, the PlayStation was cool. Sony had been spending their time annoying Nintendo and making adverts about girls with facial deformities. The original PlayStation had even been hanging out at raves and promoted drug use. All Nintendo had was a fat plumber, and Sega, well, they'd gone off to Switzerland to end it all. But being uncool didn't stop Microsoft, and in 2001 the Xbox was unveiled to the world.
Let me now unveil Xbox.
To try and look all cool, Microsoft employed The Rock, the second most popular wrestler in the world behind Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan. But even the most electrified man in all of entertainment couldn't help. Turns out, making a console, unlike Hobbits, was no small feat. Microsoft knew it was important to get a decent launch lineup of games. So they stole the Oddworld team from Sony and persuaded them with money to make their next Oddworld game an Xbox exclusive instead. But it was Microsoft's deal with Bundy, who were working on a first-person shooter called Halo Combat Evolved, which proved to be their best purchase. Halo was about a green man called the Master Chief, who goes around shooting aliens for being aliens. Was it right for Microsoft to flood Bungie with money for Halo? Could Halo reach the right audience? They were soon to find out. Released in America in November 2001, Microsoft finally entered the console war, despite the fact consoles wouldn't do very well in the war. The Xbox launched with games such as Addworld Carpet Munch Odyssey, Metropolis Street Racer, Shrek, Fusion Friendly, Shrek, and Dead or Alive 3. But it was their big exclusive Halo Combat Evolved which made the headline. The game was hugely popular for Microsoft. Edge magazine in the UK even gave the game 11 out of 10, which at the time was only the fourth game to get the accolade, after Super Mario 64, Gran Turismo and Shrek. Microsoft managed to shift an impressive 1.5 million Xbox consoles before the end of the year. But it was a different story in Japan, written in Japanese. Despite shifting 250,000 consoles to Japan, they only sold 7 units in the first month of release. It's worth considering that Microsoft was considered outsiders in Japan, mainly because they're an American company and people from Japan are Japanese. Plus, they were in an industry dominated by Japanese companies. Basically, it didn't help that Microsoft were a foreign company in a place where it's not as frowned upon to be xenophobic. Many outside the US felt that Xbox controllers and console were just too big and couldn't fit in places with small homes like Japan and the Shire. But it wasn't only Japan and Middle Earth who were not fussed by Microsoft's new console initially. Europe wasn't bothered either. After a reasonable launch in March 2002, sales of the Xbox dropped sharpish, leading to Microsoft to self-harm by cutting its prices from £299 to £199 within just 5 weeks of launch. This led to disgruntled customers who had just recently bought the console, so they were punished by being given 2 games and a controller. But the strategy actually worked. Dropping the cost of the console and losing further money increased sales. Nintendo decided they wanted to try it too, and so reduced the price of their GameCube before it had even launched to try and teach Microsoft a lesson. It didn't work. Microsoft dropped the price again, only to pick it up and find it was lower than when it initially went on release. It seemed like Microsoft was addicted to lowering the price of their console, and by 2003 they entered rehab just shortly after reducing the cost of the Xbox in the UK to £129. This was a massive drop from the £299 at launch. All this led to Microsoft taking heavy losses, financially, not staff. Not happy with losing money, Microsoft decided to spend more as they acquired Rare in 2002 for $375 million. Rare thanked Microsoft by making more games for the Game Boy Advance than they did the Xbox.
I will soon experience complete oneness with an interconnected global community of game warriors.
You're a piece of shit!
I can feel the energy flowing through the high-speed Ethernet cable.
Last night.
On the first birthday of the Xbox, Microsoft celebrated by remembering they were going to do this online gaming thing and unveiled their subscription-based online gaming service, Xbox Live. Xbox Live was this revolutionary service which allowed gamers to play games against each other while staying in their own homes, using the internet, like had been available on the PC for years, but now costs money. And with the use of a headset, you can hear kids from all over the world shout how you're gay and how they slept with your mum. Soon games such as Mac Assault, Crimson Pies and the sweet tales of Hitler and his pals in Retire to Castle Wolfenstein were being played online by gamers all over the world. Xbox Live started to become popular as people started to develop friendships with those that they'd met online. Not real friendships like in real life, but virtual ones, except they were with real people, not virtual people, like that annoying paperclip. Competition between Microsoft and Sony was heating up, but the Xbox was just getting hand-me-downs from the PS2, without many original titles of their own. Sony had the likes of Metal Gear Solid 3, God of War and Final Fantasy X, whilst the Xbox didn't. However, Microsoft did manage to pick up the exclusivity to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. The prequel films had not been overly popular, so the game was a prequel before the prequel, a sort of pre-prequel. It focused around a bad guy called Malak who has a laser sword and goes around killing people, whereas you play as a Jedi with a laser sword who goes around killing people. The game culminates in the two fighting it out with laser swords over who's killed the right people. After not too long, a whole bunch of video game series that were previously PS2 titles came to say hi on Xbox, including Max Payne, Silent Hill 2, the Burnt Out series, Metal Gear Solid 2 and the Grand Theft Auto series featuring a crime-focused old age pensioner. GTA was a sort of murder simulator where you went around shooting people, having sex with prostitutes, shooting people, running people over and shooting people who are shooting people. The Xbox version released with improved graphics, making all the murdering look better, but it still wasn't enough to convince the buying public to pick up an Xbox over the PS2, proving that graphics do matter. Counter-Strike was an extremely popular game for PC, and so it seemed to make a lot of sense to create a version of that for the Xbox too. The game had an exclusive single-player campaign which they forgot to include, also forgetting to include any graphics. In 2004, Microsoft forced Bundy to release Halo 2. Fortunately for them, it did so well, it became one of the fastest selling forms of media in history. Unfortunately, many people weren't able to enjoy the game at launch, as millions of people around the world coincidentally suffered from this thing called Halo 2 flu. Halo 2 was a groundbreaking multiplayer game in which players all over the world would virtually sit on each other's faces. Halo 2 solidified Master Chief as an icon, who's now as synonymous with Microsoft as Sonic is with Sega, Mario is with Nintendo, and Sega is with failure. But despite making $124 billion in the space of 24 hours, Microsoft was still losing money. Forgetting where they'd put it, they ended up having to cancel games. This included casualties such as True Fantasy No Life Online and Book, or BC as it later became known. BC was an extremely promising game, which followed the story of Jesus Christ as he fought against dinosaurs as part of a tribe who needed to evolve and migrate to survive. Peter Molyneux, managing director of Liarhead, and never one to get caught up in hyperbole, claimed it was one of the most ambitious games ever made, shortly before cancelling it. Some have suggested that Molyneux that it wasn't going to live up to its promises, just like the ones he'd made with the 2004 release of Feeble. Peter suggested in that game that you'd be able to plant an acorn which over time would grow into a tree. It never materialised, and embarrassed, Molyneux metaphorically hung himself from the very virtual tree he never bothered to create. With all the cancellations and lack of sales, it wasn't too long before Microsoft had other intentions, and decided to cheat on the Xbox with a newer, younger model. Microsoft considered leaving the gaming industry, but instead made a 360 by making a 360 and announcing their console, the Xbox 360. But Microsoft still battled with Sony though and released games for the Xbox, which now people called the Xbox One. Whilst the PlayStation had Gran Turismo 4, the Xbox had Forza Motorsport, Sony had God of War, Microsoft had Black Ninja Gaiden, Sony had Resident Evil 4, Microsoft had Conquer Live and Remated, Sony had Killzone, Microsoft laughed and pointed to Halo 2. But by 2006, Microsoft had all but forgotten about the original Xbox. Still, Seamus Buckley feels that the Xbox came and left its mark for everyone to see.
Well, Xbox was a failure. Xbox is the Halo player.
Seamus, upset with the way the Xbox went, decided to bulk up, shorten his name and became WWE wrestler Sheamus. He should be happy. The Xbox did really well in retrospect, selling 25 million units and helping the PlayStation 2 become the biggest selling console of all time. With the original Xbox, Microsoft cemented their place in the game industry. They'll be difficult to budge and they'll probably be sticking around, possibly due to the cement.
Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.